Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Inside Line F1 podcast and Pits To Podium. As you know, we've had our special USGP coverage, and it was backed up by a special USGP as well. What an amazing race it was! And we've got a ton to cover for you here today on this episode, where we speak about Max Verstappen's amazing drive, about whether Mercedes could have actually gotten the win for Lewis Hamilton, more on Sergio Perez, more on the fantastic McLaren versus Ferrari battle that we saw in the midfield, and everything else. All of this and more on this episode of the Inside Line F1 podcast and Pits to Podium. Let's go. Hello there, folks. Welcome back into the Inside Line F1 podcast and Pits to Podium. My name is Soumil, Arora, host of The Driving Force on Disney Plus Hotstar, and I'm joined by Kunal, Shah, the former marketing head of the Force India F1 team, who currently works as a motorsport consultant at the VS Sport Network. But guys, I want you to picture this. It's a wonderful Sunday afternoon and you want to cook a nice meal. You say, right, let's make some steak. So you ready things up, you buy the steaks, and well, the thing is, it takes time to prepare, right? So in the meantime, you say, why don't I make some soup? And the soup is seemingly lovely. Then you saute some vegetables because the steak is also taking more time and they look tasty as well. In the meantime, you check up on your steak. It looks very good. It looks like it's going to be very juicy at the end. And by the time you actually make sure that the steak is done, you cook some pastry as well, which also, by the way, is pretty delicious. When all of it is done, you've got a juicy steak, you've got some crispy vegetables, a delightful soup, and a really sweet dessert. And at the end, you say, well, that was a lovely package, wasn't it? And that's what the USGP was. You got your main course, you got your dessert, you got your appetizer, everything all rolled into one. And there's a good chance everyone would love it unless you don't like steaks or you're a Lewis Hamilton fan. Or maybe you're Lewis Hamilton yourself. And honestly, it's not an and. It's basically like he doesn't like steaks or the race that happened. But either way, a jolly good weekend, Kunal, and made jolly good by Verstappen's amazing drive where seemingly the strategy was stacked up against him towards the end, but he held it out so well. What a weekend.
What a weekend and what a start to the episode. A jolly good start and a jolly good example of how, Soumil Arora out here saw the whole race cook up in his eyes, and being vegan, I don't know what it's like to, what steak tastes like, but I can tell you that if it's anything like how the American Grand Prix was, it's probably a little tasty as well, right? And full of meat as well, because we're talking of the Circuit of the Americas, 400,000 odd people, epic, given COVID-19 and all the protocols, everything put in place, I believe it was pretty fantastic, right? And also, it's to say this is classic motor race, two of the title protagonists up ahead fighting, their teams backing their talent, their cars, their strategies up, both of them trying to win the race. And I have few words to explain how the race unfolded. And mind you, it was, I tweeted about this. It was like lap 1 was racing, lap 2 till lap 50 was all strategy, and then lap 51 to 56 was a fair bit of racing as well. Yeah. And for everyone who's new to Formula One, strategy is a core ingredient of Formula One. And you'll keep hearing these things that Formula One's a game of high-speed chess. And ladies and gentlemen, the 2021 United States Grand Prix was actually a game of high-speed chess. And it was the pit walls that were literally playing the chess while Verstappen and Hamilton were driving the wheels of their car, whatever the heat and the Pirellis actually allowed them to do so.
Yeah, exactly. It was so tremendous, and it was backed up by an amazing McLaren versus Ferrari fight at the start of the race as well. And that sort of racing was tremendous, which we shall get to, but more on the meat of the battle, right? The steak that we're talking about. The main event is what the Americans would call it. Hamilton and Verstappen. And Kunal, there was genuinely a case to make for Max Verstappen all the way around, right? Even after he lost out at the start, we knew somewhere that Red Bull looked awfully comfortable at that stage. And they got it done through both the undercuts. But you've got to give it to him. His drive towards the very end when you're under tremendous pressure from Lewis Hamilton, he just did not crack at all, did not let the gap get under 1 second. And I suppose that was the important bit because Lewis just could not follow, could not get the DRS eventually.
Yes, and I'll put it this way: that at the end of the day, we all wanted to see a wheel-to-wheel battle between the two, and we actually didn't really get to see one apart from turn one on lap one, literally speaking, right? And Max was aggressive, Lewis kept his line, and so on and so forth. And it was a regular course of action. And Lewis has done this before. He started in P2 and then jumped to take the lead, at the exit of turn one. But to me it was just so much strategy involved, right? That the placement of Checo Perez came into extreme importance, Soumil. And the big question to everyone was asking is, could Mercedes have won the race? And my memory is fairly short, like a little longer than a goldfish, but fairly short as well. And to my mind, Max Verstappen drove a very Hamilton-esque race. Hamilton is known for such races, making the tire work in his favor, making a strategy work in his favor. And Red Bull, for once, was actually very, very aggressive in their strategic approach towards Max's race as well. And Max actually turned around and said it pays to be aggressive sometimes. And Red Bull just seemed like they were preempting what Mercedes would do pretty much every lap of the race. And Red Bull had better, the Red Bull car was better on its tires as compared to Mercedes, and they used that important factor of their car at the Circuit of the Americas to their advantage, because Max got pole. He of course was P2. He closed in on Lewis, but he did not have the 1 odd second gap that needs to make an overtake happen. So what did they do? They just started using the fact that Max was second, Checo was third, and started playing their moves correctly to force Mercedes into a strategic corner where they had to act in a particular way. And I loved how Max was able to read the race. He kept telling the pit wall, Lewis is sliding around a lot, and that feedback would have definitely helped. And then as soon as Max pitted, he said, let's not let Lewis go longer. Let's get him to pit, and let's use Checo to do that. So lots of I would say with a very world championship worthy drive from Max Verstappen, Soumil.
Indeed, and I love the fact that two-stop races are able to make things so compelling in this nature, where we have a variable like this available, be it Catalonia, be it Hungary, and so many examples of the same, where we have that excitement towards the very end, and we need more of that. It's just a lot of good fun. And it's amazing with Max, as you rightly mentioned, he was thinking about these things, and eventually they backed Hamilton to pit. But Mercedes apparently have now come out and said, in a couple of articles that I've read, reliable sources them, they've said that Mercedes, they were a bit more confident that Hamilton would win. Of course, in hindsight, had they pitted a couple of laps earlier, had they given Lewis that little bit more of a window to go out and beat Max. And I think they set target +6, but they boxed 8 laps after Verstappen, Kunal. Was that the difference according to you?
It's like this, that if Mercedes needed to win the race, they needed to be the first ones to make the pit stop. And that would have meant pitting earlier than Max in the first stint itself. So it was literally a case of Red Bull using Max and Checo completely to corner Lewis Hamilton. And then at the end of let's also look at the two stints, right? After the first stint, Max actually had to use more of his tires to pull out a gap. He had to overtake Ricardo. He had to, of course, clear Charles Leclerc as well. So at the end of his second stint, he actually had run out of tires. But what happened is when he took on the third stint, the second time he pitted, he actually did a lot of tire management at the start. And two things that literally stood out for me, in the penultimate lap and the last lap. And this is probably, something that I keep tracking time and again. So that's how I picked this up. So the first was Max saved so much of his tires for Lewis's attack that in the first sector of the last lap of the race, he actually had the fastest first sector timing. right? So that's how much he saved his tire. And second, I'm sure everyone was wondering, what is Mick Schumacher doing, in that slow Haas, holding up Max, especially when Lewis was chasing. But the point is, because Max was chasing Mick at that time, uh, Max actually got DRS on the front straight, thanks to Mick, where Lewis
Yeah.
Hamilton did not have that for himself. So lots of things that actually fell into, Max's lap. And like I said, Max drove a Hamilton-esque race, and Red Bull, again, I'm not taking anything away from their pit wall strategists, but they pulled off a strategy which we've seen Mercedes do time and again, right? And the difference between the cars was so little that Red Bull realized that they can win the race if they kept Max in clean air and not behind Lewis Hamilton. And that's what they eventually optimized, right? And the last thing I have to add here in the Red Bull case as well, and this is more a question.
Hmm.
We heard after Turkey that Adrian Newey had a bike accident and he wasn't available for a few races and so on. And now he is back. And I'd love to know from Red Bull at some point how much of their win in the United States of America was attributed to Adrian Newey coming back
Mm.
and helping Red Bull with their car setup issues, like Helmut Marko pointed out.
Which were very evident in Turkey, by the way, hence why this seemed very much out of pace. But one question that pops up in my mind before we move to Sergio Perez, Kunal, is that I think he's just ready, isn't he? I think Max is ready to be the world champion. With a drive like this, you get a feeling that the all round package is here. And that we haven't had that feeling for long, have we? We've seen so many young talents come about where we just point our finger and say, hey, this guy could be a future world champion. I guess with the drive like this, you're just right there, just 99.9%, I suppose.
Yes, you're right. It's like I'm already thinking of a headline we could use, from crash kid to world champion, literally. And again, adding a few more perspectives. This is the first time in his career that Max Verstappen has had a championship winning car, or a car
Hmm.
capable of, challenging for the championship. And he has been ready for it. He has been nurtured, and he's been trained for it. Of course, Red Bull have gone through their whole painful inducting program, as we all know. But to me, it just stands out. And after Turkey, everyone was asking the questions: has Red Bull lost pace? Where did Red Bull, sort of get their biggest gap to Mercedes? And then everyone was worried, but not so much so Max. And I sat through the press conferences and the likes, and he was just confident that they had turned the tide, and that their package would deliver, depending on a lot of circumstances. So all in all, it's great to see that the battle still continues, and the fact that we have two very, very competitive teams and drivers.
Make that three, by the way, because Sergio Perez just had a stunning rodeo at the Circuit of the Americas with suboptimal conditions because his drink, with the double C, of course, if you're a Kimi Raikkonen fan, his drink failed after lap number one. And since then, in the scintillating heat, Kunal, he was just sitting right there without being hydrated. And he mentioned in his post race interview that after lap 20, he literally was losing strength, losing feeling in some of his body parts as well. And to still recover and to go right there at P3, I can only imagine what things would have been like had his drink been working, because his pace was fantastic. And it's clear, right? Had it not been Max on lap number one, or maybe had Perez not been in a Red Bull, he would have gotten past Max. He was just having that momentum after turn one. Checo, all throughout the weekend, has been stunning. And what a way to cap it off. I suppose these are the kind of races that Red Bull really got him in for, where they can not only just challenge other drivers and get a podium, but use him in a way that they can back Hamilton up into a corner, as you mentioned earlier.
Absolutely. And, I think Checo's race, like you said, with the drinks tube issue, and I was listening in on the radio channel before the race in his form, in their sighting laps, or reconnaissance laps, as we call them, as the drivers drive out of the, pit lane and get onto the grid. He was mentioning that Checo was
So it's like technical issues right there for Kunal. We'll be right back in a second. But a word on Sergio Perez, right? As Kunal was mentioning, even with technical issues, even with having the drinks issue like he had over there, I just love how Sergio was able to fight back. And that sort of fight back is something you expect of Sergio Perez. And to see the celebration on the podium,
Recording stopped.
To see the way
Recording in progress.
Don't mind the Zoom lady, but to see the way Sergio Perez was actually fighting back, right? And you could see it on his face. He was dehydrated, he was exhausted, and without the drink, Kunal, I suppose we just took Kimi Raikkonen's performance for granted when his drink wasn't working because clearly it can have a major, major impact.
It can. And, Checo Perez, like I was saying, and I think I got kicked out of this call because Checo Perez had a drinks issue in his reconnaissance laps itself, right? And his balaclava was fully drenched. They had to change it pre-race. And then it turns out that he had apparently loose motions in just before the morning of the race as well. So he really fought hard physically and mentally against a lot of challenges to sort of make his podium finish happen. And what a time for him to sort of come alive when Max needs him. And the next race is his home race as well.
That was graphic. I don't want to be cleaning up on his car after the race is done. But hey, so long as you get a podium, I suppose it's all worth it. But even in the fight, Kunal, in terms of Drivers' and Constructors' Championship, this result does bring Red Bull a lot closer. All things considered, the fight is genuinely on right now. Of course, with Lewis and Max, it's only 10 points. But to see Sergio firing, I suppose this just has come at the best time because now Red Bull can challenge for both championships. And that's the best thing they could ask for, to be honest.
And that's why that's why they've hired Checo Perez with the hope that he's able to deliver. And Checo has been very honest, saying it's taken me a long time, longer than expected, to sort of get settled and adapted to the Red Bull car and its different characteristics and so on. And like you'll hear it in pretty much every motorsport show and commentary, the Constructors' Championship is the business of of Formula One. That's where all the money lies. So Red Bull would be hoping that they're able to sort of capitalize on Checo's run to try and get more points against Mercedes, because in that championship, they are 22.5 points behind right now. So, let's see how they're able to turn things around. And of course, Mercedes has that whole issue of reliability. If Lewis is going to need a 6th ICE and maybe Valtteri Bottas will take a 7th ICE at some point because his car number is 77.
Did you guys see the meme that Valtteri Bottas put on his story? Someone said that, Valtteri Bottas has decided to leave Mercedes and open his own parts store full of old Mercedes parts. And Valtteri put it on his own story. It's crazy how many parts they're going to take. It's like just a slight tap on the wrist for taking extra parts. I don't get it. Maybe they'll find a better way out, but you mentioned it correctly, Kunal. The business end is the Constructors' Championship. And let me open up my points tally because I see that the gap between McLaren and Ferrari is only 3.5 points. And I suppose it's evident, right? The way they were fighting on the first lap. I don't have any fingernails left, by the way, in case you can see on the video. If you can't see, of course, on the audio version, there's literally not one left. All of them gone on the first lap. And then in the middle as well, the appetizer, the soup we're talking about right here, the fight between Sainz and Ricciardo, just outstanding intensity all the way around. And even though Sainz had a different strategy, he just didn't back down.
He didn't back down. And, I loved that fight because against former Red Bull drivers, both of them, chose to leave, or they chose Max Verstappen over Ricciardo and Sainz, as we all know. And, to me, the McLaren and Ferrari battle on the opening lap was incredible. The drivers were fighting themselves, of course, making sure that they keep the car on track. They were fighting their rivals, in this case, the other team, and they were also fighting their teammate. And the the confusion was so much that Ferrari actually thought that Carlos Sainz had to give the place back to Ricardo when he actually said, "Hey, I gave it back. Do I need to give it to Norris?" And it turns out that Carlos Sainz gave the place back to Ricardo despite not needing to do so. And then that was the place he was chasing all through the race. So Sainz's weekend, in his words, was absolute crap because he said he got stuck onto the soft tire because of a gamble they took in qualifying of Q2. And then they were confused as to which McLaren they had to let go, in the opening stages of the race. And it was iconic. And, to see all four drivers deliver, to see Daniel Ricciardo, out qualify and then outrace Lando Norris. It's something that McLaren was, also hoping to see. Not that Ricciardo goes ahead, but Ricciardo gets as competitive as well. So, I'm sure this one is going down to the wire as well, Soumil.
And don't forget, Charles Leclerc got P number 4, which was just a tremendous drive from him as well. I mean, he did his business early on, and that's when things became really boring for him. And boring in a good way, to be honest, because P4 is just the result they need. But I still can't get over that first lap. That was just the kind of racing we all want to see. I mean, 3 incredible drivers going at it against each other. And importantly for McLaren, Kunal, Norris is not the one getting the highest position this time, which, I mean, it may not sound like the best news in the world, but to see Ricciardo firing, that is awesome stuff. And on the whole as well, Bottas was in the mix of that fight. Turned out to be really good. But there we say it, right? It has to be one of the best battles of the entire year. But battling was a bit of an issue all the way around, especially for Fernando Alonso, who was really, really, really grumpy today. And I like this grumpy Fernando Alonso, Kunal, where he's just constantly trying to prove a point to the FIA, like, oh, this is wrong, whatever you're doing. It's like his whole focus of his entire season is not to score the maximum points with Alpine, but to prove the FIA wrong. I just love it. He's just entertaining all the time.
I think Fernando Alonso is a little bored with the lack of competition he's probably had, because he's not fighting for, the world title, as we know. Alpine is 10 points clear of AlphaTauri, and then way beyond, like Ferrari is 1.5 times the kind of points as Alpine is. So Fernando said, okay, you know what? I'm going to just battle it out with the FIA. So he did that in Russia, as we know. This race, he was, of course, battling with the FIA on, overtaking outside of track limits, and he was saying how these rules are a bit of a joke. And frankly, it's entertaining, no doubt about that. The way he showed Kimi Raikkonen and Giovinazzi various ways to do things, and then proved a point to the FIA, and then the Alpine FIA race message exchange, all of that was fun. But let's remember, in all of this, Fernando Alonso ended up losing over 8 seconds on those laps to Kimi Raikkonen, and we're talking of the 5th fastest car battling against the 9th fastest team car, etc. You guys know what I mean, right? So it's great to see Fernando do that, but at some point you have to ask, did he let go of more solid points or more solid opportunities on track by engaging in a battle he probably will never end up winning when it is the time to win, which is during the race itself?
It's like a student trying to fight with a teacher, right? It's not going to end well. It's not the most productive fight in the world. It's just fun for everyone watching, and that's what's happening with Fernando. Eventually, he retired, but on the whole, you get an idea of what's happening. A shame that Alfa Romeo couldn't quite get a point. Again, their own mistake, because Kimi Raikkonen spun out at the very end, and Giovinazzi couldn't quite get past Vettel. But before we wrap up, Kunal, one really good positive has to be the fact that Yuki Tsunoda is in the points, and we're getting more drivers building up confidence. And so, in the last 5 races, we can just have an all-star battle, not just at the top, but also, as I said, in the appetizers and the desserts in a way, in terms of the midfield and the lower midfield. Your thoughts on this weekend as a whole before we wrap up?
I think it was a fantastic celebration of Formula One in America, and every single person, whether they were listening in, they were writing or tweeting at us and reaching out to us, via our various social handles. I think every single person has literally enjoyed the celebration. And after St. Food, after Monza, and now with the Circuit of the Americas. These are now becoming model Grand Prix for organizers, for fans, for countries to follow. And this is exactly what Liberty Media wanted. They wanted 21 Super Bowls, as I remember. Of course, now it's 23 Super Bowls that they will target next year. And this thing was nothing short of that. I've never seen a Super Bowl. I don't intend to. It's not the sport I follow. But I can only imagine with all the NBA players, Shaquille O'Neal, I mean, his podium, stands in the middle of Hamilton, Verstappen. That's going to be a meme for several years to come. And then several other celebrities. I mean, Ben was Stiller each time the camera looked at him, and this is something somebody tweeted at me last night. So fantastic celebration for me, Soumil, and that was the standout for me. And before we wrap up, what was your standout point?
My standout point was just the crowd. 400,000 people. Just put it into context. 400,000 people. That's, I don't know, Kunal, maybe the size of the city you live in or something. It's ridiculous. 400,000 people. that is crazy. And it's not like Circuit of the Americas is slap bang in the middle of a city. It's not. It's tremendous to see 400,000 people come out and celebrate Formula One, as you mentioned, Kunal, on the weekend. But as has been the case throughout this USGP weekend, I must end on a very bad joke. If you are an Indian listener and you understand Hindi, Bada Shakil is what we saw at the end. Not Chota Shakil. That's a terrible one, I know. But just tremendous to see him just towering over all the other drivers. But I suppose it's nice to have sportsmen and sportswomen, of course, hopefully as well, present trophies to other drivers when they win. That'll be a very good way instead of inviting the CEO of someone. Nobody knows who they are. So adding more glamour to it. And also, just the final thing. The truck, the horn truck, Kunal. Did you see what happened right there?
Of course.
I just love it. I just love it. What a weekend on the whole. And I hope you had as much fun as the Red Bull mechanics did while sitting on there during the podium celebration, folks. Thank you so much for joining in. Thank you for listening. And you know the deal. We'll be back here on the Inside Line F1 podcast for more race coverage. So subscribe to us, leave us a good review, and see you rather soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.